Madam Chair.
Okay, is there anyone else on council that we haven't heard from?
Madam Chair.
One moment, please. There are other people that haven't spoken. Did you give them an opportunity? Anyone else? Go ahead, Anthony.
I'm going to quote one of the famous TV stars. A lot of you know, but the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and I don't think anybody would object to transferring that money to fund the senior center. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
But still, again, I'm sorry, I'm just, can I?
Go ahead and speak.
We're putting it into the general fund, the $200,000. If we use it for toilet paper, I mean, by saying we're putting it to help the senior center, or we're buying salt, or we're buying Q-tips, or whatever, we're using that money in the general fund to be used for what the needs of the city are. I don't think we need to say, because it may not be, that we are putting it into the senior center line item. It's being, I mean, we're transferring it to the general fund for the use of the city.
Appropriating it.
To finish whatever they need to do. I mean, we
I
keep
disagree with
alluding to that.
that. You have to point it to where the fund and the money needs to go.
I don't think that's
You're
proper.
showing the
I think it
residents
needs to
where
go
it's
in
gonna
the
go.
general fund.
When you appropriate it, that's
Yeah.
determined.
Give an
Then you
explanation.
That's
appropriate
what we're
the general
deciding, where that
fund.
money's gonna go.
Right,
Two-step.
all right, once you do that.
Two-step.
Irene, can you clarify that?
Yes, if I may,
Go ahead.
funds cannot be restricted in the general fund. The senior expenses are run through the general fund by nature of the definition of governmental accounting. To have a separate fund, like the 200s, a program must have over 50% of funding from outside of the municipality. Since the senior program does not have more than 50% of its monies coming from grants and other sources, then it's a general fund expense. So the expenses are in the general fund. General fund is unrestricted. It will still help the senior center in the sense that the city, the money that it was using to subsidize it can be used for something else. But just so you know, there's two things on the government account. You cannot transfer, and I may have misled you, you cannot transfer money into the general fund. You only transfer money out of the general fund. So having said that, there's one or two things, as Ms. Jones has stated, you would have to charge expenses, as she has stated, and the mayor, to the waste collection fund to use up some of the dollars. Or, as I recommended back in the summer, dissolve it and have it run through the general fund. So therefore, the excess would be there for appropriations such as the senior center.
And we wouldn't have to argue about it every year.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
Madam Chair.
that makes good sense. Go ahead, Mr. Brownlee.
The arguments for transferring it, you guys are giving a bait and switch. You're saying we have all of these costs for collecting garbage, therefore we need the money in the general fund. But when you talk about transferring the money to the general fund or dissolving it and putting it in the general fund, you're saying, look, now we'll have extra money to fund the senior center. I think it's just like the traffic cameras. We claimed it was all about safety, and it wasn't. Let's not play another game. If you want the money to fund the senior center, simply say that. Now, if there are costs to the city, legitimate costs, all that we need to do is itemize them and charge them against Fund 251. If you want to do that, all you've got to do is come up with a list of what those costs are, how much they are, and add them to the expenses of Fund 251. There's no necessity to transfer money or abolish funds. I believe that would be the most transparent way to go about dealing with the money that our residents have given us for the collection of garbage on their curb week by week. Now, concerning the general fund and trying to fund the senior center, the short of it is we need $325,000 to do so. So what we need to do if we want to fund the senior center is cut spending within the general fund, $325,000 elsewhere, so that that money is available to fund the senior center. So therefore, we should look through and see where could we cut something to get that amount of money. The railroad retribution money will not be there next year. It will be spent this year, and there won't be any more coming in. So I don't think we have any other silver bullets to count on for money to make up that $325,000. So what we're going to have to do is find things that we feel we're spending too much on and cut those till we have $325,000 of extra. Or we look at the senior center and we figure out what services are most important and we fund only those. So we only have $200,000 or $250,000. That's where we are. If we want to fund the senior center as it stands right now, or as it's been running in 2013 or 14, we'll need $325,000. So we'll just have to look at the other line items within the general fund and say, I don't think we should spend that much money there. Cut that and increase the spending in the senior services. Seems pretty straightforward.
Bill's right in a way, but we still at the 200,000. You keep going back to the 325. We won't have to go in the budget to take another 325. We take 125 to get out of our list, out of our budget. And we can always ask for donations. I had a number of people already ask me about it. Is the city going to go for donations to help operate this center? All we'd have to do is say it, and I tell you, I think we would get overwhelming success. And if we get the nitpicking in here, we can come up with it. And like Linda said, there's no way that you can decipher one little part from the whole part right here. You get the food pantry. That's an important part. So is this center. Home meals, that's an important part. Who's going to make that decision that that person is going to be left out?
We are.
I am.
We're in control of the money.
We're going to go through here and try to find the money.
I know, that's what
Let's try to do what is necessary. If we can't, then we'll let you lead the way on who you want to cut.
Madam Chair.
I don't know, is it who or is it the department that's
Yeah.
trying to cut?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, you know who, the resident, what part of it.
I think
we
that's
could do
why
this.
we're here,
I think
Alex.
we can do this.
Alex, this is why we're here,
Yeah.
to go line by line by line. I know Irene has sat with most of the departments. Haven't you, Irene? You finished
Yes.
almost all?
Right, the service, police, fire,
Right.
senior.
And their budgets have all been decreased from last year, from what we're looking at.
If I may, on page 6, if you want to turn to page 6 of the appropriations.
Which calendar date, 11, 17?
Yes, that's probably the only one you have for the appropriation, I think. And it has that one. On page 6, if you look on page 6.
This one.
And you'll see a,
Hold on, please.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
On page 6, there's, on the left-hand side of the black line,
Okay.
you see the top column is entitled Change in Appropriations Between 2014 versus 2015. If you drop to the bottom, you'll see that the general fund expenditures are projected to be reduced by $4 million. So, you know, when you're saying add more cuts, I mean, you see the various departments and where like there's $1 million already in fire, $1 million in police, I mean, you know, to go down the list. So, I just want to point out there have been a lot of cuts from 14 million to 10 million in the general fund.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Tony.
Irene, can we somehow then figure out how, and I can't be politically correct on this, but how we could use a portion of the service department budget to come out of the $200,000 out of that certain line item? Is that easier to propose?
Yes, I've done that, I just didn't incorporate it, but basically, I figured that about, in talking to Tanya, like a couple hours a day, about 20%, you know, 25% of the budget for the service department that works on the streets and what have you, and I think that budget is close to 500,000, so, you know, there you could probably pick up 90 to 100,000 that could be directly charged to the waste. The only catch with that is that those funds are already being funded. So I can show you on page. Well, flip over to page 9. And if you would go down to Fund 270.
This one, too.
Okay, the one with me, Fund 270, about 2/3 of the way down the page.
Yeah.
For the SCMR. Okay, that's where the majority of the service workers are charged, and that's already a special fund. Their salaries are not in the general fund. Okay, in the general fund, for the most part, is the secretary assistant, Tanya, which is back on page, just bear with me.
See, I didn't see her in there. All I saw was service director,
Yeah.
because I was kind of looking for her before.
1 second.
It's probably on, service director's on 3.
Yeah, on page 3, at the bottom, under the service director department. Okay, that's the department, that's the way it's been entitled, which is towards the bottom. So the salaries you see there, you know, would for the most part be just Tanya. But the point I'm making is that that department has $49,000 of expenses. It would have to be from this department that we transfer to the waste. And there's not enough there. Okay, the other one that I referred you to on page 9 is 270. That's where most of the service workers are charged,
Right.
and we can't transfer from there to 251, is it? So I'm just saying that that's, I mean, what you're saying is good and logical and acceptable, it's just that there's not the money there to transfer, to charge there. And you could, most you could charge is $49,000, you know, which is from the general fund.
Ms. Cole,
Yes, sir.
at 270 SCMR, how many employees make up those salary and wages?
Offhand, I can't tell you that. Let's see, between 270 and 271, that's the total
Okay.
service department, and what is it, about 10 folk? I don't know offhand.
No,
I
it's
think it's
not.
like 6.
We have like 6 and a mechanic,
And the,
and as director, it's like 8, but,
okay, 8,
yeah.
between those two,
But 6 actual workers.
right,
Okay.
so between those two, but I'm just saying that this is where all of their expenses are charged. And you'll see corresponding revenue if you look at the resources under 270. Those dollars are designated for this, so I can't take them from here. The expenses would have to come from the general fund to allocate to waste management, to the waste collection. So that's why I recommended back in July again that that fund be dissolved, which it can be. This body set it up, this body can dissolve it and just have the funds run like the building permits and all the rest. I mean, we're not having a problem paying MBIS, it's through the general fund.
We're not having, they just told us they were 2 months behind with them.
Did they tell you that?
Yes.
Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, if you're looking at buildings, all buildings at least 30 days because you're billed the following month.
Uh-huh.
So any given day, any bill could be 45 to 60 days, depends on when we receive it and the day we cut the checks,
Uh-huh.
okay? So there's no one that could come in here and say we're paid up to date unless they discontinued their service. You always have that. I mean, we have bills that people are billing us now for October. To give you a perfect example, if you want to come in and look at the records, today we received the Page Catering for the jail. The bill is dated October, but we received it today. So they could say they're 2 months behind also.
What does SCMR stand for in
We
270?
went through that. It's
Yeah, I
street
remember.
construction, maintenance, repair, something of that nature.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's it.
Is it?
Street construction, maintenance, and repair.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, we can go over and over and over and over, but I'm hearing that other folks have plans that of things that they could possibly come up with to cut or take out. I mean, is that what I'm hearing? Mr. Brownlee, you have a plan that,
Yeah, I've got a couple things we could look at right now. If you
which
want to.
is?
If we go to page 6, top of page 6.
You looking at the one that, page 11, 17 again?
The projected revenue.
Okay.
You see human resources. Currently, we're paying about $104,000 in total compensation for human resources. I think we should consider going to one part-time employee. If we pay a part-time employee 30 hours a week, $25 an hour, it'd only be $39,000. That would be $65,000 right there.
Madam President,
Go ahead.
Human Resources used to have 2.5 employees. They're down to 1 person. The workload is astronomical. Can't even keep up. If that would happen, that person who's there now, that director, would more than likely resign, and we wouldn't get anybody to come in here and work for, what'd you say, $65,000? That's a joke. That's a joke. Check around other cities and see how many people work in their HR departments and how much they pay their directors. And you will find out that it's really amazing that we even have someone in HR right now.
How many employees does the Human Resources Department manage?
All of them. Full
What
and
about
part-time, all of them.
What about the bargaining units? They're handled, those employees aren't covered by our HR?
Oh, yes, they are, on a
In what
daily
ways are
basis.
they?
All unions go through the HR department, all negotiations they're involved in. Every single meeting, every single workers' comp claim, insurance claim, every single function of an employee when they get disciplined, when they are laid off, when they're filing grievances against the city, filing complaints against the city, all of that goes through HR.
So how many employees, non-bargaining employees do we have?
Around 20 non-bargaining that are, like, you talking full or part-time? Can you be a
I guess
little more?
both, yeah.
Well, it's full-time, about 20.
20 full-time.
Yeah, about 20, give or take a couple. You know, we may lose a few more by the end of the year. And we have a lot of part-time employees too that are non-bargaining. Employees that work here in this building, school guards, the animal wardens part-time.
How many would you estimate?
Dispatchers, jailers, you know, I don't know, maybe 60, 75,
Dispatchers and jailers are bargaining units.
but they're part-time.
We're looking for non-bargaining part-time.
But I understand that, but they're part-time. It's very
So
unique that we
How
have
many non-bargaining part-time do we have?
Well, that may bring the number down to maybe about 40. Auxiliary police are part-time. We have a bunch of those guys. City council is part-time. HR manages all of your affairs too, whether you know it or not.
Go ahead, Alex.
We was gonna check one time, we asked, maybe 2, 3 times, about checking with the county on the HR.
Outsourcing.
Yeah, nothing.
I think that unfortunately, some of that has fallen apart since Fitzgerald started his campaign, because there was a change in the person who was running it. Melissa Burt was running it at one point, and I don't see her being listed again. So something we can look at again if we get serious about this. But all that, I think what they do is, in other cities, I think they do parcel this out to legal, if I'm not mistaken. Do you have any other experience with that?
My experience is that there is at least 1.5 HR personnel. There's usually a director, and they may call it a specialist, someone to help with the paperwork, filing leave requests, and as the mayor said, different forms to come in, workers' comp, unemployment negotiations, managing insurance. So my experience where I've worked in other places I know, there's at least 1.5. They would call it a director and maybe an HR specialist, which would serve as a secretary administrative assistant.
So the 109,000 cheap, is what you're saying, Irene?
Well, again, based just on my experience, some of those salaries are $80,000+, depends on who you're talking to. And then you add an assistant, which is usually at least $20, $25 an hour, and the benefits. The benefits seems high in proportion because it's one person. And of course, the higher the salaries, the more salaries, then that percentage or ratio will go down compared to salaries. But, check around some of the other cities, 80,000 plus, and then like I said, a part-time person, maybe $45,000, $50,000 plus benefits.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Crowley.
If we would turn to page 4. We have the finance department, salary and wages. The total for salary, wages, fringe benefits is $247,000. But if you just look at the salaries and wages, $188,000. How many people work in the finance department?
There's 3 persons there.
Including yourself?
Yes.
Okay. Because that averages $62,000 per person plus benefits. What justifies paying that much for these employees?
Well,
That's a substantial sum.
well, it's substantial, but if you look to your left, you can see where it had been from 239,000 now to 188. I'm not sure what justified that back in 2012, but what I know justified now that the workload of 5 people are being done by 3. So that's what justifies it.
Well, I would suggest we look at adjusting that, because I think $62,000 is too much. If we want to save money, we're going to have to save it somewhere. So that would be one area I would suggest looking at.
Madam President, I find this really offensive from someone who's unemployed and doesn't even hold a job. I think you're way out of line. And I don't know what you think is relevant in the real world, Councilman. But again, if you checked other cities, you would find out that we are on the low end of what we pay, not the high end. And a director makes top dollar, assistants make less. That's the structure of a department, like a chief makes more than a captain, who makes more than a lieutenant, who makes more than a sergeant. You know all about that, don't you? No response. But I really do find this very offensive. The finance department had 5, 6 people working in it at one time. Now we're down to 3. And you want to go in there and cut their pay because you think that it's high, that it's too much. Really?
Well, we did ask for suggestions, Mayor,
Well,
so.
can we get realistic suggestions and not, you know,
Madam President.
let's go into this fantasy or whatever this is?
Mayor, I have a question for you. At
Sure.
one point in time, we had discussed the possibility of shutting the jail down. Is that still on the agenda?
Well, I can't speak for the chief because he's not here, and I certainly don't want to ask the
Right.
captain who's, you can answer if you want to, but I don't think he's prepared. But, we can look at that again, but remember, the jailers did make major
They did the contract,
concessions.
right. They did.
Major.
We do.
And gave up a lot, just like the firefighters did. So, I think everyone is doing their part, and we are, if I could just say this, we're not cutting into the bone anymore, we're into the bone marrow around here. To go in and selectively go after jobs or salaries is just ludicrous. What do you want us to do as far as like handling the workload? By just saying, oh, put a part-timer in there. Or those people make too much money, cut them. Then when they quit, then who do we get? Who do we hire? Who wants to work those jobs for that small amount of money?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
I want to put maybe a little bit of different spin on it. I don't think, me personally, don't want to target any specific person or department, but just to try to get a little bit from all of them to add up to something that would be a substantial number that would help fund this line item that I think, these line items that I think a lot of us want to see numbers by, so that we feel confident that going into 215 and through 215, the human services will be funded in the budget. That's what I would be thinking, and I don't think we're paying exorbitant amount of money. I just think under these extraordinary hard circumstances, to try to fund these line items, everybody, one of my favorite sayings is everybody gives a little. Then one department doesn't have to completely shut down or close up. I think that's what I would be saying toward that. I know we're not paying top dollar, understandably so, but then you do the but. But if we want to fund this center, where do we come up? There's no one place we can go and get all the money to fund it with, which means we got to get the money from a lot of different places. I think that's the only thing I would be saying toward that.